Okay, in this video I'll be going over the scene setup for the sofa configurator. I'll be going over scene overview, environment lighting, different types of background styles, and scene features like SSAO, reflective flow, shadow plane, and etc. I'll be going over camera and its controls as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay, before we get started, let's create a scenes folder to keep things organized. Inside the scenes folder, let's create a scene. Let's call it sofa main scene. Select scene and press save asset. So before we go in depth, I'd like to give you guys a brief overview. Here we have our basic outliner, different controls and tools. We have two different tabs, layout and logic. Layout is where you find most scene properties. Logic is where you have different rules and configurations that you can set up for the customization of the product. We'll go over this in coming videos. Switch back to layout, and we have a properties panel. Here you find most settings related to the scene. You have to select the top node to access the scene properties. So let's take a look at the scene properties. Here we have different environment settings, different types of backgrounds, uh, player, default cameras you can set up. We have virtual reality settings, or screen space, ambient occlusion. You can have different controls for these, physics, post effects, V-Ray post effects, and reflective flow, etc. And you can access further controls. Let's say for camera, you can select camera and you get camera controls here like lens, viewport, uh, the constraints for the camera, etc. Okay, to get started, uh, let's import in the model sofa model that we have. To do this, expand the asset library, and here you can see different assets you have in this org. You can identify them by these dots on top, and you can, when you hover above them, you can see which type of asset it is, model, and they have their own unique color code. uh, for textures it's yellow, green for models, and materials orange, and scenes have blue color. So let's drag and drop the sofa model to the outliner, and select the sofa and press F to focus the camera. When you drag a model asset, it creates a model node. With this model node, you can reference in different model assets. You can expand and you can drag, change to a different model asset you have in this organization. This could be further used in configuration to switch between different products. Let's switch back to sofa. Okay, now that we have the asset, let's go over the lighting. Quite often the clients want you to create a unique lighting for their product. They usually want you to match it to their current images, or they might give you a reference image, and you have to generate a lighting map based on that. You can either create a HDR or a EXR file output, and both file types are supported by Cricut platform. Okay, I went ahead and generated a HDR light map for the sofa. I use HDR Light Studio and V-Ray etc. to generate the light map. You guys can use any other software that you guys prefer. But the outputs, the HDRI and EXR file formats are a 32-bit file format, and they are quite heavy. based on their resolution. I typically have my HDR light map below 720p to better optimize and basically the higher the resolution of these maps, the more the file size. So I try to keep it below 720 uh, to decrease the load times extra. So we can drag and drop the HDR map by going into the assets, textures, and I'll create a folder for the HDRI. We can drag and drop the HDRI map. Once it's imported, we can set it up in the scene. Okay, once the environment map has been imported, let's refresh the page to get the latest updates. You can now select the sofa main scene and navigate to the environment properties panel. Here in environment map asset, let's assign the new map that we uploaded. So for Studio HDR, and you can visualize the lighting change. You can see the new environment map that you uploaded. There are various settings for the map that we uploaded. You can change the rotation of the map to match the software settings that you have when you created the environment. I'm going to set it to 180 to match the settings I have in Maya. You can flip the map as well and change the intensity of the map. You can see the product getting changed based on the environment intensity. You can also set the ambient color, ambient light color. You can set it to any color that you prefer. You can also change the intensity of the ambient light. And there are different types of background styles. Environment, visualize the environment HDR map that you assigned. Transparent makes the player transparent and it'll display the background web page color that you have. Color will make the background to any color that you prefer, black, white, or red. You can set it to any color that you prefer. You can set it to an image. You can use a blurry image or any other image that you have. You can use cube map, etc. I'm going to switch it to color. You can check the product and refer to the lighting that you made in the HR Light Studio or VRAY or any software used. Check if it's matched properly, if it has the right rotation, etc. Also, let's go over other features that we have here. Okay, SAO refers to screen space ambient occlusion. To use screen space ambient occlusion, you have to make sure that the materials that you use on the product do not have any ambient occlusion maps, because that overrides the SAO. So when I right now enable SAO, you can see that there isn't any change. You can see that it's not making any visual change. Let's go to the material that we created, fabric 1 material, and let's remove the ambient occlusion map that we baked, and let's refresh the page. And now you can see that the ambient occlusion changed, the shadows and everything changed, and now you can see this SAO being used. Set it to 1 and you can change the world radius, threshold, etc. But for this scenario, I baked the ambient occlusion using the HDR map that I made. So I'm gonna go back and assign the ambient occlusion that I baked using the lighting. Let's refresh the page. We also have an option for reflective floor. When you enable, you can see the reflective floor. Let's change the environment color to white. And there are different settings for the reflective floor. You can change the opacity of the reflective floor. You can change the strength and the distance. I'm going to go back to default. This can be used for various products and depends on the client requirements. Now that we have the sofa, to meet our objective of creating this scenario, I went ahead and created a environment set similar to this. Uh, I like this environment, the white materials, and as this emphasizes the product. At the same time, you can visualize the scale and the proportions of the sofa in the environment. As you can see, I have created this basic environment set, some basic materials. I baked the shadows and the lighting into the ambient occlusion map of the set. It's all based on the environment lighting map I baked earlier. So let's go ahead and import the environment set that we made. Drag and drop the environment set model to objects, and as you can see, this looks much better, and you can see the scale of the sofa at the same time and the lighting, etc. Also, if you guys want a generic background and stuff environment set, you can set the environment to background style to color and white. You can use shadow plane. The shadow plane lets you, instead of baking shadows, you can use this to bake a real-time shadow based on the screen. You can see it automatically creates shadow based on the objects. Say if I have a box, see it gets a shadow automatically. It creates a shadow in real time. Also, you can control the shadow plane, opacity, blur, the resolution of the shadows. You can use 2048 or 512. Although this is resource intensive, you can change the pitch, the yaw. As well, and you can visualize this. If you want, you can also rotate the you can create another shadow plane instance of the shadow plane and rotate to get the back, like the side wall. As I set it to 19. Let's scale it up. So you can, as if there's a wall behind, you can change the opacity, blur, etc. You can change the pitch and yaw as well. So you can use it to create different scenarios. It's quite flexible. So if you prefer this kind of look, you can do that. You can limit the camera to here, etc. Okay, let's go back to. Okay, now that we have the environment and the software setup, let's set up our camera. So you can create a new camera using this icon, and let's rename it to interior camera. Uh, there are various properties and controls of the camera. You can either use focal length or field of view. Let's position the camera in the 3D space. You can visualize the camera by switching to it in here. You can adjust the field of view, let's say 30. You can change the near clip and the far clip. It can also automatically adjust. And there are different control modes for the camera. Orbit uh, lets the camera rotate around a specific target. First person makes the fixes the camera in a one location, but you'll be able to look around like here, as if a person is standing and looking around. You can use static mode, which will make the camera stationary. No turntable, which will make the camera stationary, but the object will rotate on its own axis. Like here, you can see the sofa is rotating on its own axis. So for this scenario, let's use orbit camera, and let's create a null, and let's place it uh, at the center of the sofa. So this will be the target for the camera. Okay, select interior camera, set the target to be now. Here you can change the orbit speed of the camera and the momentum based on the mouse interaction. And there are various constraints that you can set on the camera. The longitude uh, controls and restricts the horizontal movement of the camera, and the latitude controls the vertical movement of the camera, and the zoom threshold as well. So let's set, and you can use either world or relative to the camera. Let's use world space. I'm gonna set the let's say the minimum latitude to be like 15 and minus 15 and max to be plus 15. The latitude I'm gonna use let's say -5 and +5, and zoom I'm gonna set it to -1 and +1. Let's visualize this on this. Before you do that, we have to set the default camera. Go to that by selecting the scene and navigating to player camera, and let's set it to interior camera, and let's reload. See, here you can test. This is the max zoom out, this is the max zoom in, and this, as you can see, the camera is going below the floor, so we have to restrict the horizontal. This is the max longitude, so let's change minus 5 is too much. I'm gonna switch it to -2. Let's increase to +10. Okay, let's reload it. Okay, now the camera is not going below the floor. There's good freedom. The camera, it doesn't feel too constricted. This feels good, and you can play around with these values and test it before and let the client test it too before, and you can adjust them based on the client preferences. So this concludes our scene setup. We'll go over the configuration and switching between different sets in the coming videos.